Okay, so where do we start? Arthritis, huh? It's not what you think. I start out all my lectures with with the statement that muscles are funny and bones are a close second. A lot of strange things going on there. We know a lot, but we're always learning gobs more. Gobs and gobs. First of all, your doctor might tell you that arthritis is not curable. You're going to end up in a wheelchair, just enjoy the ride, basically. But it's not just that. It's pretty phenomenal in how exciting the real deal can be when you figure out that bones are a whole different thing than you see in your x-rays. In fact, I bought this book, cost me $86. Anyway, I got it, and they reference 4 times in there that radiographic evidence does not correlate with the pain. In other words, when you get your x-ray back and your MRI back and a doctor says you got arthritis, it doesn't correlate with the fact that pain is or is not there. In fact, John Sarno, my great guru, is an internal medicine guy, and he's looked at a lot of chest x-rays, obviously being an internist, and he said that he could see a really fine back, really outstanding, just straight as a flagpole, and the guy's in excruciating pain. Then he looks at another back, it looks like an old oak tree, it's all bent over, and no pain. How could that be, huh? Well, that's why we can't really base your diagnosis of arthritis on just one little aspect of it. Basically, you've got to look at the clinical history and all that to get some kind of an idea of whether you've got arthritis or not. It's not a defined term. Arthritis just means an inflammation of your joint, and that can be any kind of pain. Join the club. We'll talk in a minute. Anyway, arthritis, huh? Strange things. First of all, we'll start out with the cartilage that every doctor says that has worn away due to massive amounts of use, running, jumping, living, and now more and more people are calling it gone at 46. I don't know about that, but that's another story. Yeah, there are so many variables when it comes to diagnosing arthritis. So really, let's look at the cartilage between your bones. I'm assuming you know a little bit about anatomy. This cartilage is between your bones. Yes, they can get thin, they can wear away, I'll give you that. But yet, when you've got a totally worn out joint, and the cartilage is all gone, the friction coefficient of the worn out joint and a really good joint is the same. In other words, you see no restriction. So the range of motion is based primarily on muscles and tendons, sinews, and fascia. All those 4 things that really have fun times in your joints. Those are innervated. Your cartilage, believe it or not, does not have any nerves. Parts of it do, but that's another story. Basically, the articulating parts don't have any. There are portions of your meniscus that have a little innervation. Innervation meaning there are nerves in there. And actually, I'm going to take you one step below the cartilage. When you go below the cartilage, you run into subchondral bone and then into spongy bone. And parts of that are innervated, parts aren't. And the spongy bone doesn't have any nerves. Subchondral, maybe. Thing is, once you get arthritis, then the nerves actually grow into that area, so you're actually looking at a timing thing. If you can catch your arthritis at the time of the start of it, you won't see much in the way of nerves in any part of that area, spongy bone, subchondral, or the cartilage. But then as your arthritis develops, as you start putting more and more pressure on those bones, the nerves will go in there and try and balance you back out again. Because actually arthritis, if I was going to say one thing about arthritis, it's an imbalance and a weakening of your whole body. So anyway, the bones do not necessarily have to touch. At times you have a floating cartilage articulation, floating with muscles, tendons, and ligaments. Otherwise, if you leaned over, if you didn't have all that strength in the ligaments and tendons. If you leaned over, your whole back could fall over like a ton of bricks, a chimney or something. You need all that rigor in there to hold you up. That can work for you and against you. Actually, when you've got arthritis, so to speak, it's working a little bit against you because it's powerful to keep yourself lined up. But then if you get unbalanced, one part will take over, another part will give up, all kinds of things that'll play games with you. And you don't need games. Anyway, then you get the nerves involved when you get into the muscles, tendons, and ligaments. That's fairly heavily innervated, meaning lots of nerves in there. When you get into the nerves and you start talking about nociception, which is the sensation of pain, believe it or not, nerves can change their shape and form, and we really don't have the data there on which is the best nociceptor and which isn't. Nociceptors are usually somewhat unmyelinated, kind of a bare capsule in there, but basically it tries to tell you that pain tries to tell you what pain is trying to tell you. It's trying to tell you what to do with your pain. Anyway, you start to see that the joint itself, in fact, I talked to 6 orthopedic surgeons about this. 6, count them, 6. And all of them did not know where the pain comes from. I would start my questioning by telling them that there are no nociceptors in cartilage, and where does the pain come from? And all 6 said they don't know. 3 had theories, but then I thought, okay, all 3 theories are different. Then the others don't know. Well, then I don't know either. So I can do anything. I can do anything with those joints because nobody knows what's going to help. Some of those orthopedic surgeons would go for weight-bearing exercises. That would help you. Another guy said yoga, doing some stretching would help, but don't push it too far. I went to a joint rehabilitation specialist, 2 months worth, didn't get any better, and they would expect you to get better in 2 to 3 months. Wanted me to take an MRI, and I said no, because an MRI does not tell you anything other than it's going to show you some abnormalities, that's for sure. You get pretty excited about some of them abnormalities. Anyway, I read 2 New York Times articles about that the best side effect, the most pronounced side effect of an MRI is needless surgery. Kind of like that approach. New York Times is nothing to spit at, really. I mean, there's something to it. So I knew that. I didn't want to scare myself. Once you scare yourself, you get a little more stress. Then, of course, you put more pressure on the ligaments and tendons, and then more and more pain will result from the stress. Stress is a component to all of this, especially when you start getting diagnosed with arthritis. That's a heavy stressor to think, oh no, now I'm going to end up in a wheelchair. You can get depressed over that. And actually, in a lot of articles, a lot of data is showing you that depression will cause pain, different types of pain. There are so many different types of pain. That's where our data is getting a little bit shy. We don't have all types of pain categorized. People have tried. I mean, it's really good what we've got. But there's much more to that type of analysis than meets the eye. Now I'll talk about some anecdotal stuff. A lady in my building, in top floor, just down the hall, had bad arthritis, got her hips replaced, went through 6 months of rehab, and is doing pretty well at about 80 years old. She had it done about 75. What had happened was she was standing, demonstrating things in a store, and in 1 week's time went from 0 pain to excruciating pain. Well, now that gives me a clue that there's not a slow development of arthritis. Yes, it can trip over, the tipping point, basically. Yes, I know about that. But is there something else in there? Like a muscle tetanizes on you. That's the proper word. I like tetany. But anyway, it tetanizes on you, and that can be really painful. That's the thing. Whenever you get arthritis, you think it's bone on bone. That feels like bone on bone. But really, it's not. Because if you get down to the bone, that's the spongy bone, a little bit of subchondral in there, but still no nerve innervation of that. I can't find. I did the histological studies. I looked at that. I looked for nerves all over. They're not in there. I've got to do a little bit more work on subchondral because one of my orthopedic surgeons says he thinks it's subchondral bone. Well, they don't have any nerves in there. So there again, he might have been caught in that. After having arthritis, you'll get more innervation in there. He didn't do his time studies on that before and after. I don't think anybody's done that. Very few people have. Anyway, I always ask my orthopedic people how the pain actually comes on you. And we'll get in the sun up here. Yeah, back to the anecdotals. Guy in my building got his arthritis pain, had many different operations and joint replacements, etc. Still is in pain. That's kind of a problem there. It's quite disappointing, I think, once you get over the initial shock. It sits there in low-grade disappointment. And that's too bad. Then he had blood clots, a whole bunch of things happened. So the thing is that I'm drawing, both of these people were fairly negative even to begin with before the pain. I'm not going to call them depressed. I'm just going to say basically their Weltanschauung, their worldview is a little less than stellar, let me put it that way. When you have a less than stellar worldview, you're prone to pick up pains. Pains are your friend. In fact, I just read in a book, one of my favorite authors, Milton Ward, is saying pain is a direction, not an affliction. Pain actually tells you that you need to change something, and then your job, should you choose, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to find what's causing you the pain. You can't treat pain directly. That's why actually, in a sense, we're trying and it's not working. Look at the opioid epidemic problems that we've got now. You can't really treat it directly. You got to go back one more step. It's a lot like cancer. If it is a protection mechanism, then why is it so? Then apparently it's made itself very hard to eradicate. How do you eradicate an entire protection mechanism or an indicator or an alarm? Yeah, you can disable some of that. You can give yourself a shot of whiskey will do some of it, but that is not getting at your foundation of the pain. And what you want to do ultimately is not just get rid of the pain. You want to go very much extremely into the joyousness of this happy life, the good life, the joyous life, much beyond happiness, of course. We're here to be happy and not to suffer. We aren't built to suffer. The body is not built to suffer. It's built to homeostatically get back into the normal joy of an equilibrium. That's why healing usually works. Let it. Like I say, don't screw it up. Your body is really well designed. In fact, I use this as an aside. When you're working with antibodies and antigens, antibodies gobble up antigens, and molecularly, the antibodies will change thousands of times a minute, just trying to get the right conformation to attack the antigen. It's actually doing a very, very rapid type of mutation of the ends of the antibodies. Really phenomenal. Your body is just a basically gigantic pharmacopoeia, and that hasn't even been invented yet. And if you lead on it and allow it to do its thing, it will get you going again. Like I always say, that the vagus nerve is a big nerve that runs down the center of your body. It controls heart rate, etc. It has a lot to do with your autonomic nervous system. And in a sense, it will put you in a circulatory or a blood shock. And then that's one step to death. It tries to get you to stay alive, but it puts you on the floor first. You'll faint. So anyway, the vagus nerve, if it's stimulated, overstimulated with pain that far, you could potentially die with the circulatory shock. So that's a big deal there. Let's move on down here. There's one big hornet. Whew. Let's continue with our anecdotal evidence. Mom, when she got pain in her hip, she just backed off. The tendency is to not aggravate the pain. I'm going to advocate the opposite. The more you use your joints, the better off you're going to be. In fact, the cartilage in your joint requires motion in order to get nutrition. There are no vessels, blood vessels, or no nutrition things in your cartilage. So you do have to move it. If you don't, it just exacerbates the problem, gets worse, and then you lose your cartilage. That is a part. I can't deny that losing your cartilage is not an issue, but there are ways of slowing it and ways of accelerating it. The way to accelerate your joints deterioration is to remain quiet. Don't do anything. In fact, a friend of mine down the hall has a problem with his knee, and he could barely walk. You know, he's getting to limp, and it's getting kind of bad. So he went for a walk at the Mega Mall, and got into some pretty good pain. And he leaned on a railing. He's kind of given up almost. And then he said, "Nope, I'm going to continue. I'm just going to keep walking." Well, it got 50% better. That's what I'm talking about. That's actually what I did. I was limping. I was having a rough time. Couldn't do stairs anymore. It was really painful. That's the way that arthritis feels. It feels like bone on bone, but it's not. It's something you pulled. It's something that can heal. Doesn't matter what the MRI or the X-rays say. It can heal. In fact, my own doctor said, do a little yoga. And a lot of people are getting more into that, and you have to keep it up. It has to take a while, but it will work for you. You can avoid the surgery. In fact, I have a book called Surgery, the Ultimate Placebo. You can do surgery. In fact, the greatest thing in joints, greatest sham surgery I've ever heard about, was pretty phenomenal, really. They took a group of people, I don't know, not too many, but enough to know. And on one group, I think 6 people, they did a little incision on both sides of the knee, like they'd already had the surgery. Well, on the other ones, they actually did the surgery. So you got a split group there. What do you think happened? Well, your suspicions are right. They both came out the same, whether you had the surgery or not. You really got to look at why you're having the surgery. The caveat to all of this basically is that you really have to do an MR or an X-ray to find out if there isn't something really bad in that joint, or really bad in your back or whatever. You do have to look in there. There might be a tumor there. There might be a broken bone that doesn't heal for some reason. There are a lot of things in there that you do have to look at. So yeah, I certainly go along with that in a big way. But once you've done that, now you can bifurcate and separate, go your own way and do your own thing. And it's usually exercise. Walking is the name of the game. I'm going to jump right to the end of this whole talk by saying you keep yourself from arthritis by walking. And I'd say 2 to 3 miles a day, fairly swift. I was lollygagging. It worked for quite a while, even at that. But you got to do about more than 100 steps a minute, and probably about 2 to 3 miles in one stretch. You can't rest too much. Keep it going if you can. All the way to the end. It's called balancing and strengthening. Not balancing in the fact standing on one foot. Everybody gets that confused. It's just the fact that you've got to balance your muscles out so they do serve their balanced roles in keeping you erect, keeping you walking. In fact, standing up, you're using 300 of your 600 muscles. Some people will count 2,000 muscles, but anyway, so half of your muscles are used standing up. Walking, you're using more. In fact, there's some really small muscles that you're using in there to maintain your balance, your system, your motions. If you looked at somebody who's going up a stairs, you look at their knees before they take the next step, there's a lot of stress, tension jumping right in there to hold your knee from keep it from sliding out sideways on you. But there's a lot of things you got to look at that way. And the fact that those muscles and tendons and everything working for you should be working in a balance. If you get out of balance, that's actually all arthritis is an out of balance system. So the bottom line is to walk. The treatment for that, I'll give you one more. Sometimes I went all the way to the end like I did here, all the way from the beginning to the end. And I'll fill in a little bit. But one thing that we're starting to get into more and more is biotensegrity. Yes, you heard that right, biotensegrity. And tensegrity was a word that was coined by Buckminster Fuller when he was dealing with his geodesic dome. You may have heard about that in the 50s. I think it was the 50s. He was developing a way to house the world very cheaply, very effectively. And he was quite the man. Do an aside of good old Bucky. But at 20, roughly in his 20s, he wanted to kill himself basically because he was getting so, didn't have anything to do really. Then he finally said, well, on my way out, I'm going to do the most I can for humankind. And he did. He got into the structures and the way that you develop this. Anyway, tensegrity is when you're using compression components and tension components to hold something together. In other words, a stick held by two rubber bands is a part of that tension structure. And we are built that way. Okay, this is a model of your torso. And this is, as you can see, kind of an extrapolation or an analog to your legs and how they bend. And you can see that if I push on one side, the other side will kind of compensate. And you can see that anywhere you push, there will be a compensation on the other side. So this is how you're all tied together. And so, of course, when you're walking, everything is all tied together and doing well. See, all of these bend and shift, and the torsion and the strength is there. It's really strong. But now, a lot of this is dependent on how your muscles, tendons, and ligaments are tied together. And I've done a lot of work on that. And I can't figure it out either. That's a region for a new study, is how the biotensegrity can actually balance this thing out with using muscles, tendons, and ligaments. That is pretty phenomenal when you look at it, as far as how that's going to work at balancing those things out and integrating them all. I looked for length and direction and intention and all that stuff, and it turned out to be much more of a quagmire than I thought. So, more power to you on your research. And meantime, you looked at a little bit of biotensegrity. And when you get into that, that's a whole horse of a different color. We're looking at a whole new way of looking at how your body is constructed. It's just amazing how we can look at that and come up with some really, really unique and fun ways of balancing this body out. When you look at pain, also doing a lot of work on pain myself, and it's a lot of fun. Pain is a lot of fun to study. So complex. We're getting into a neural pain matrix, a pain neural matrix, I'm sorry, where it's so complex that pain is so driven by what you're thinking, your stress levels, your mind, etc. So really, one precedes the other, one may not precede the other. In other words, under stress and tension, because of your arthritis, you may bring on more of it. And that's a nasty cycle to get into. To break it off, start looking at some of the things I've just told you, that what you believed about arthritis is not true. There's much more to it than that. I'm not saying it's all wrong. I'm saying it's not complete enough. So let's complete that in the next segment of arthritis.
So my body is just showing the wears and tears. My shoulders they tell me are gone, but I'm just waiting on that, not in any hurry, because they're not a weight-bearing joint, so I'm just holding off. And
yeah, granted, the pressure on an articulated joint, like your knee or your hip, can vary. Sometimes it'll be fairly snug in there, but again, it's partial this, partial that. It's not 100%. Can you imagine carrying half of your upper body weight on one small joint all the time? You would wear that out real fast. There's a dynamic in the spacing of those joints. And one guy did a little research on that and found out with watching an x-ray that the joint really doesn't touch. The joints don't really touch until you load them up pretty good. And he didn't go that far to load them up. But yeah, there's joint loading on those cartilages. But yet how much and how long? You know, all these things we don't know. It's a lot like how the eye accommodates, how the eye actually focuses on close-in things. So many different parameters involved in that. And yet we can ferret out some of them and make our lives much better. All knowledge is good. And we can enjoy the different parts that we bring to the table. And we can share and make our lives happy. Now, what do we go on and do in our lives? We go out and have fun. pretty phenomenal, really. When you start looking back at my past, having been here, learning to fly, going all over the world, and coming back finally to here. And I could have been somewhere, could have been somebody else, somewhere else, doing all kinds of exotic things. But no, I'm having a good time here. In Minnesota, it's the greatest summer we've had in a long time. But yeah, it's phenomenal, really, how this weather has been cool all summer, and it hasn't had much rain. It's just been perfect. Who else can say perfect about anything? But anyway, getting back to our little arthritic expose. Now it looks like there are people out on my dock. But getting back to my expose on arthritis, I forgot to mention there are basically two kinds of arthritis. One would be the rheumatoid, which accounts for about 20% of all of the arthritis, and that is sometimes diet oriented, and it can be stress oriented, a lot of different things. It can be congenital, all kinds of things. Just heard today that one person had the congenital arthritis and got rid of it by walking 4 miles a day. That's pretty good testimonial for any kind of arthritis. It's pretty phenomenal, really. And now we're looking at other aspects of arthritis too. See what happens out here. Yeah, it just came out just recently where Wall Street Journal had an article about running, and running is good for you. That's come and gone all the time throughout arthritis' history. Is running good or bad? Pounding on the joints, etc. Well, actually, the joints are pounded on all the time, and yet they're buffered with all those muscles on either side of it that strengthen, contract, and balance out the pressure that is actually put on cartilage between the bones. So again, intermittent running is not that bad for them. It's actually pretty good because it does any kind of movement. Maybe that's what it's all about, is any kind of movement helps out. Also, people are playing tennis, trying to get rid of their arthritis. That it doesn't necessarily work as much as walking does. Walking is that magical thing, carrying maybe a couple of pound weight in your arms. Arthritis of the shoulder isn't very common. That is a frozen shoulder basically, but we won't go into that. That can be gotten over with good physical therapy, and a lot of things are being done with physical therapy. That's really great. Dr. Sarno, same thing there with how weak you actually get, and the weakness of your muscles plus stress and rage is what he calls where the mind will actually tetanize your muscles around your back. It's not the intervertebral disc. Well, that's another topic. Another talk is the back pain. But anyway, Dr. Sarno has a lot to say about it, that we get so weak. In fact, I was at a seminar the other day about bones, aging, etc. And the instructor, it was at the Mini Medical School, meets twice a year for about 5 weeks, 2 hours a week. And so 10 hours of lecture on any given topic, which is really fun. But this one instructor started out and said, hey, how many people in here have ever heard of sarcopenia? And out of 250 people, about 4 raised their hand, 5 raised their hands. That was pretty phenomenal, because that is called muscle weakness. It happens as you get older. You lose about 3% of your muscle per year over the age of 45 or 50, somewhere in there. So it really does drop you down to 30 to 40% weaker than you've ever been. People are really surprised at how weak they are when they start climbing and doing things. So anyway, that's another aspect of arthritis, is that weakness, how weak you can get. My God. Then another point is I did chiropractic besides the joint rehabilitation. Anyway, the chiropractic didn't work very well either. He jumped all over me, bent my legs, did all sorts of things, moved my back, adjusted, and he said after 6 sessions, you're out of here, because he expected to see some success. But there again, it's pretty hard to blazon success on anybody who walks in the door, and I can understand that because it's so multifaceted. So anyway, there we have it. There are the continuation of my arthritis paper and my arthritis holdings, if you will, and things that can really help you avoid surgery, really, and Surgery is sort of easy. You can capitulate into surgery pretty easily. Don't have to, but yet it's easy to capitulate and say, hey, that'll take care of it all. It is so difficult to think that maybe getting up and walking every day for 20 or 30 to 40 minutes might fix it. But is that an option for a lot of people? No, and that's what I'm getting at. So, more later. Okay, I'm starting up the hill here now. Back when I was taking my joint rehabilitation specialist classes, and when he was bending me all over, I thought, and then reading everything that I could about arthritis, found out I can do anything. Nobody knows what causes the pain, so I can just do anything. It doesn't matter. Anyway, now I just thought, since I can do anything, let's start doing some heavy pressure stuff. The climbing these stairs, this path here. And then I started to do anything I wanted to do. And of course, it was a little bit more than physical therapy, and I needed more than physical therapy, a little bit more strength building. And I intuitively sensed that, so that's why I went on this wonderful walk here. Doing well, huh? This is it. It is quite an ascent when you get around to it. Okay, let's continue on with a few major points, like 5 major points. First one is apparently you're really interested, everybody is, in chondroitin sulfate and glucosamine. Do they work? Well, I've got a lot of information, both good and bad, and in some cases it does work, other cases not. There's not much data on it really that confirms it or dissuades you from using it. A friend of mine does get some results when they take it, and that's a stiff neck, but that can be certainly muscle. We'll look at that later, of course. So a lot of this is placebo, and we're going to get into this very directly. All of the next 4 aspects are placebo-controlled, basically. You've got to look at placebo as being anywhere from 35 to 60% of your healing. Why not use it? That's Andrew Weil's comment. He thinks, why not just put this placebo together in a data bank and then let all you people use the anecdotal evidence and go to town? And I think that's really pretty phenomenal when a guy opens up like that. Still, with the chondroitin and glucosamine, you're still working on building cartilage back as being the answer to fixing a joint. Well, that works when you've got an extremely destroyed joint, but not generally with a standard garden variety arthritis. So anyway, the second one is you might have heard of PRP, platelet-rich plasma. And they take some of your blood out, centrifuge the hell out of it, and take out all the red blood cells, and then inject your joint with the remaining plasma. There are platelets in there. They're more concentrated. Platelets do a wonderful job with clotting of blood, but they also secrete some other fun things that are associated with the immune system. So actually, they are on the right track in one sense, that it drops the pain sometimes, and because of the increase of the activity of immunity in that joint, and other factors, I'm sure. One of the things you got to look at when you're looking at a joint, and this is just an ad hoc thing, it doesn't have anything to do with the point I was making with PRP, but you got to look at joint spacing. Joint spacing is a big deal. That's how they determine whether you have arthritis or not, if you don't have much space between your joints. But the problem is, you can lose space between your joints on an x-ray just by compressing cartilage. It's amazing because an x-ray can't differentiate between compressed cartilage and normal cartilage. So it all looks like a joint space. And it would be a massively narrowed joint space if your cartilage was smooshed, compressed. So they can't get a real readout on that unless you do an MRI. Of course, that's a different story. You can then see your joint spacing, but we're still barking up the wrong tree. Talking about barking up trees, we'll continue with the trees and barking here in a minute. The third one is hyaluronic acid. It is a natural occurring substance in your body, and they inject it into your synovial space in between your joints, and it takes the place of synovial fluid, basically, so it may make your joints ride better. But we made the point that an arthritic joint has the same friction coefficient as a normal joint. So why are we trying to do that? I think it's bring the inflammation down, and it's a good try, but generally I haven't heard much success with hyaluronic acid. Have to practice up on that one. Anyway, the synovial fluid, yeah, it's fun. It's kind of like WD-40 for your joints, but I don't know. I think, again, it's have to rely on a little bit of a placebo effect there, I think. And now number 4 is an injection with cortisol. That takes away the pain to an extent. It's an anti-inflammatory and a real good one. So in a sense, that probably would do it for a while. You usually get about 3 or 4 months out of it. And you can inject that as much as you want, really, but they say hold it down to once every 3 months or so. I probably would, because cortisone is a pretty powerful anti-inflammatory, and in some medical circles it's called holy water. My physician friend calls it that. It's kind of fun to think about that. Anyway, now the 5th point is stem cells. Stem cell therapy is being touted a lot. In Minnesota, we had 4 companies pushing it, and California had 124. That's the difference that you can see for some of these factors. But actually, it's kind of unproven, untried, untested, and all the unwords. So really, it's not really that legalized by the FDA. It's not I don't think the FDA has done much with it, and they're just waiting to see themselves. Maybe it will work. So I would put my stamp on number 5 there with the stem cells. A lot of that is going to surface. However, it's very expensive. I went to a meeting, and they charge $1,500 a shot, and they sometimes need about 3 or 4 shots. Do the math, $5,000–6,000. I don't know if I'd bank that kind of money on an unproven therapy. I must add one more thing with CBD oil, greatest craze lately, and I think there's something to it. I would be most positive about that one of the last 5 anyway. And then whatever seems to work might be heavily placeboed, and yet I don't care as long as it works, right? As one guy said, one orthopedic surgeon said, whatever works, even though the placebo effect may kick in. So anyway, now my last point is when I first started my work on all this wonderful arthritis, Mitchell Yoss came to write up on one of the first searches I did. Mitchell Yoss just wrote an article for a magazine called What Doctors Don't Tell You. The magazine is published by Lynn McTaggart, and I think it's Mark Harmon. Anyway, they got together and tell you all kinds of fun things. And the cover of that magazine said, "You do not need a hip replacement." I like that. He comes right out and says it. And he goes on to show you some exercises that are really good to loosen up some of those muscles in your back and your upper body. In some cases, the muscles go all the way down to your knee. So sometimes you can have back problems, hip problems, and knee problems, and it's all the same muscle. Usually it is the psoas, the iliopsoas muscle, the big muscle that connects the top half of your body to the lower half of your body. Now, there are 2 exercises that you can do, and I don't have a place to show you here. Let's see if we can find that and give you a little demonstration. Most of the time, the muscles that you're most concerned with are the psoas and the piriformis muscle. Don't worry about where they are. They're just the 2 muscles that affect your joints the most. So I'm going to show you the one that's really good for your psoas muscle, and that is the lunge. You just put 1 foot in front, 1 foot in back, and just lean down like this as far as you can go, all the way to the floor if you want. And then come back up again. That is the best. You do it on both, of course, both legs. That's the best exercise for your psoas muscle, which is the main muscle that connects your lower back to your upper bones of your legs. The other one is just too simple. This is for your piriformis and you name it, and that is just raise your leg like that. Do this 10 to 20 times, and that seems to really work. You can run your azimuth all the way out to the side, or run it in front. It really doesn't matter. Usually somewhere between 45 and the center is about all you need. So those are the 2 biggest exercises. Those are the ones. Very simple. Very simple to do, huh? So that's the name of the game. You can put weights on there too, a couple of pounds, 5 pounds. Wear yourself out. Break a leg. Anyway. The other thing I do want to bring up is as you get older, sarcopenia sets in. We've certainly talked about that. But as your muscles weaken, they actually contracture more easily because they're easily overstressed, because they're weak. So you get this contracture going on, and that's why as you get older, you start to get more muscle pains too. So it kind of goes together with your arthritis problem. So in summary, the sham surgery that's been done, I told you about that, whereas the placebo effect kicks in and takes over. Actually, they did arthroscopic experiment where they, I think we talked about this earlier, where they just kind of made an incision on 6 of the people where the arthroscopic and not arthroscopic, but yeah, it was, and a debridement of your joints. And they didn't do it on 6 or 7 of them, and they did do it on 6 and 7, and both results were the same. That is quite the phenomenon, really, when you start to look at it. Anyway, all these different things I just listed are kind of barking up the wrong tree. Don't bark up the wrong tree, bark up the right tree. If you're going to be a dog, bark right. Get some attention, get some food, get some pats. And that, of course, is where you start working on your muscles. Muscles are the name of the game. Do your musculature balancing and strengthening. Like in exercise, doing the exercises, number one, my friend who is a bodybuilder said, do it. Whatever it is you choose to do, do it. And secondly, it's easier than you think. Doing it would include walking. And that's easy. And just do it. 2 things. So, we're off. Bye-bye. I started to talk about the nth degree, the next step beyond all of this fix-it stuff that I'm talking about as far as arthritis goes. And actually, the point I want to make is into that realm of the spiritual, the unseen realm. Some people don't even have a comprehension of what I mean by spiritual. Well, the unseen realm, aspects of life that seem to help you out, seem to be alive, almost like a God is there. You can pray to it. You can do all sorts of things to it. Sometimes things don't happen the way you want them to, so you throw that idea of God out. And that's the beginning of my talk, when you throw your idea of God out, saying, it didn't work. Anyway, you got to kind of go on more and more and say that God might be an entirely different thing than a concept. Yes, we can conceptualize a God, but is that enough? Maybe we have to be part of that God in order to even conceive of it and or see it. Lately I've been really kind of impressed with the fact that my own awareness of the fact that everybody is on their own path. Everybody is starting to see underneath the games of life and into the great truths that we can enjoy here. And getting back to what I was talking about in arthritis and health, you really have to get to a point where you see that agony and pain do not belong here on this earth. If you see it, then you can get out of it. It does belong, of course. It is a direction, as I mentioned, and not an affliction. Pain is a direction. It's somewhere to go, some place that needs help, some place that we can get underneath it all. And isn't that nice? You get underneath some things and fix it permanently. Like if your alternator light comes on in your car, you want to get a new alternator or fix the old one so it doesn't do that anymore. Same thing with pain. It is that direct a relationship. So if you can come to the confirmation in your own life that agony is worthless, that pain is worthless beyond a certain point, it is not there to punish you. Sins are their own punishment because of the reactive coefficient of doing something that is not fully fulfilling. And that's what we're really getting at, is the unfulfilling nature of life is a sin per se, short-circuiting you. So actually being short-circuited is when you get into this pain realm. So yes, there's a place to go. Do you need pain any longer? When are you going to give it up? I talked to a friend of mine and I said, when are you going to give it up? And boy, that pissed her off because she thinks you have to unravel all these layers. And I said, no, you're in your own way when it comes to the healing of that part, because who said you haven't got full healing right now? Granted, there are wild cards, there's elements we don't understand, but we can certainly get to a point where we have a fulfilling life, don't you think? Wouldn't we have been born that way with some of these fun things going on in our lives? And also the awareness that we don't have to have that many unfun things going on. So anyway, here we go. Let's talk about other things later. We're running out of battery here. Such a nice quiet day. What kind of spirituality can we talk about now? We got into a little realm of pain there. That's exciting. A little pain goes a long ways. Like an itch in your nose, that's a little pain. Huh? Anyway, what levels of pain do we have to deal with? We don't have to deal with any of them. We can just kind of slither underneath and slither out. That's the ephemeral nature of this life. I talked about this yesterday to a friend of mine. The part of the drama of this life is how easy and how ephemeral and how quickly you can slip out. Each heartbeat means everything. Oxygenation in your blood means everything for 3 to 4 minutes anyway. So yeah, we're actually doing well with that type of understanding. That it's really rigid. In other words, life is really good. We're here for a while. We can bank on it. We can have a great time. But the other part is we can slip out very easily. And that dichotomy, that diotomy, should be a word like that, is what drives this thing. It's kind of the polar opposites and the one end of the string to the other that carries us right along into the great excitement and fun of this existence. I don't think we can actually answer the idea, why did we come here? Did we make a decision before we were born? Decisions don't count. It's an evolution of life itself. And that is what's standing here talking to you, an evolution of life itself. So, you are that also. Cool, huh? A book I read, I really enjoyed, by a Maharishi of some kind. Anyway, he just said that it's an evolution of life itself from the unmanifest realm. Here we are, having fun. The spiritual aspect that I wanted to make, the spiritual point is, once you see this, once you see that it's all divine and all phenomenally ethereal and awesome and beautiful and good and magical and miraculous, then you can kind of sit on that and watch all your pains dissipate, because you've got a comprehensive understanding that goes beyond understanding, the peace that passes all understanding, and it makes you relaxed. Where again, relaxation allows your body to take over and puts you back into homeostasis of a good life, of a fun life. We're here to have fun. We're not here to suffer. We can't suffer very long, and we're gone either way. So enjoy this aspect, and then you don't have to worry about doing the other aspect of escaping. Like I read in one book, and I really enjoy that, and that is that never underestimate the wisdom of no escape. You can chew on that for the rest of your life. That means when you come to the end of your rope, there's something to be discovered that goes beyond just another understanding or throwing out another old theology. Some great vitality takes over you. That'll be fun. Okay, more. Well, here we are at the university, having a good time, continuing on with arthritis and all kinds of joyful things like that. At least to get you out of the way of arthritis. A friend of mine is 99 years old. Actually, he turned 101 almost. And he had every joint in his body replaced except for one hip. And his doc said, hey, you should have that hip fixed. It's really shot. And he said, I don't want it fixed. I'm not in any pain. What's the problem here? So he just skipped it. Made it to 101 anyway. Anyway, anecdotal evidence that total dissolution of a joint doesn't necessarily mean pain. Anyway, a friend of mine also, her mother had bad hip, side pain, all that. Doctor didn't know what it was. They looked all over and finally just capitulated into calling it arthritis. I don't like that kind of a diagnosis, a default diagnosis, if you will. That didn't work very well. My friend also had hip problems, but it was started in her back. Actually, they're all connected in the iliopsoas muscle. So anyway, she would lay on a rolling pin and it went away. So it was back related. We'll talk about more later. Replaced. The other one just waited for 5 years and the pain went away. She had also had some knees replaced, but that's different. Anyway, there are a lot of ways you can get rid of arthritis. One might be waiting long enough. Another way to find out if your muscle pain or your hip or joint pain is stress is if it's listed in the Inquirer. If it's in the Inquirer, it's basically stress, because people get rid of it real easily just by waiting it out or riding a bicycle or something like that. So yeah, I think part of it is the stress component. In my wonderful arthritis book, it's a colloquium of many different MDs and surgeons and all that. And they argue whether it's central nervous system based or whether it's locally based pain. If they're arguing, that means they don't know. Now that's really pretty broad spectrum of not knowing something, isn't it? That's amazing, really. One of the biggest discoveries as I was looking over my notes and all my reading and all my research is a lack of motion, a lack of exercise, a lack of whatever you want to call it, causes the deposition of calcium and phosphorus in the joint. That's why on your x-ray you see these white opacities on the ends of your bones. Well, that was due to lack of use, and they don't have usually a before and an after x-ray. So it's pretty hard to determine which came first, the deposition, and then the arthritis, or the arthritis, then the deposition of those minerals. We don't want that deposition. So anyway, that's what makes it really look bad, but yet the bones are always changing. Every 7 years you get a whole new set of bones. So yeah, I think there's a way of getting rid of a lot of that problem. Anyway, there are 100 kinds of arthritis, and mainly two, and we mentioned those before, one being rheumatoid, the other being osteoarthritis. So anyway, take your pick. A lot of different ways of having pain in your hip. When people point to their hip on the outside and say, oh, I've got hip pain, that's not their hip. The hip is mainly in the groin, closer to the center of your body. The reason for an x-ray before you go through all of this stuff is to see if there's any real major problems, like I mentioned before. Well, here we are walking down to the path to cross over the river. Should be fun. I've never been on this path before, and I saw it from afar, so it reminded me that it's even here. So this should be fun as we approach this mysterious entryway. Okay, back to our arthritis expose. Thing is that gets me about arthritis is they give you a long list of possible causes, like being injured when you're 3 years old. Yeah, like it never healed. Okay, that's just an assumption. Never really been proven, other than yes, you can weaken your bones, and that's what we're talking about as a weakness strengthening thing. Anyway, a friend of mine is wheelchair bound because of her weight. She just keeps getting about the same with arthritis, sometimes better, sometimes worse. Activity, non-activity. Yeah, there's a big toss up there. Should we pull off it, or should we get right back on the horsey and ride? A lot of activity might be the best, and actually I'm advocating walking. It's the only activity you need. Diet, arthritis, rheumatoid, maybe, but osteo, not necessarily. I wouldn't even try there. Here's another point. The stronger you are throughout your life, the more you are probably apt to get arthritic pain. And that seems counterintuitive, because the stronger you are, you'd think you'd be precluding that. But really, when you get that kind of strength in your muscles and you become unbalanced, then you really can feel the pain. In fact, it's counterintuitively almost worse. So that is a strange aspect of it. A friend of mine did that. Really is in deep pain, but he is really active and phenomenally athletic. And he's wondering what happened to him. Anyway, I had a great aunt. She was 99 years old. And she said, all those aches and pains, they'll go away. I kind of depend on somebody who really knows what they're talking about age and getting aches and pains. Now, there is also an aspect that came to mind just recently when I'm looking at biotensegrity, and it's in my folder. It's about how to build a robot. If you were going to build a robot, how would you do that? Well, they got new things coming up in Robotville, and that is, one is called the series elastic joints. What it does is it takes all the motion that you're moving, putting your foot down, the gravity, and rebounds it. So you actually are adding energy each time you do walk. As a robot, that means a lot because you're saving a lot of energy and you're getting it from just normal activities. It also kind of applies to how we get out of Earth's orbit and into space. We use the moon to sling our satellites around it because it's actually falling. It adds energy to the satellite with the gravity of the moon, and then it blasts off. I went to hear the guy speak who actually discovered that. Of the 6 orthopedic surgeons, 3 of them did offer a possibility of why, where we get the pain. One said it's extracapsular. Nice lady just came from the OR. I was talking to her and she said, yeah, it's not necessarily in the capsule, in the joint capsule, so that's kind of strange. One guy said inflammation of the tissues around the joint. That's very much the same. A little bit of a collusion there. And then cytokines. One guy said, yeah, I think it's an inflammation of that synovial joint, synovial fluid, etc. So actually with all of this stuff coming down the pike, I found out that I can do anything I want because nobody knows. That's really great. Nobody knows. That's fun. So anyway, this little talk is unique in 3 ways. One is we talked about, well, maybe we didn't. Let's talk about it now. Tension myositis syndrome. That's John Sarno. I mentioned John before. He's an internal medicine guy over in New York. He's 86, 88, doing real well. He's done 30, 40,000 backs, and he's primarily a back pain guy. But he is talking about how if you starve a muscle of oxygen, it will tetanize on you and really get painful. We talked about that earlier in our chat. And so he's saying that, and I'm saying this may apply to some joints too. Maybe just tetanizing those muscles around the joints creates that kind of intense pain, and we think it's bone on bone. Biotensegrity, that's our second point and how it's unique, this little talk. We're bringing in a whole different way of holding your bones together, holding your body together, and when that collapses, you get this type of pain syndrome. As far as rubbing on the joints, yes, sometimes connection with the joint can be very painful because it aggravates the tissues around it. I think they were partly right there. And then the third way this talk is strange and unique is I launch into the spiritual realm. You have to answer that question. Are you here for some reason, whether punishment from God, punishment for your sins, something you're doing wrong, whatever? Do you need this type of pain? If you can come up with all pain and all agony is worthless and really firmly believe it with the core of your being, then you're on the way to see that this is not necessarily necessary. Anyway, that's it. And when you're talking about spirituality, I might mention enlightenment. Enlightenment is kind of cool. Enlightenment is actually the way of seeing how the divinity and the joy of this life the way it is. And when you can see the divinity and the awe and the miracle of each thing, each structure, each leaf, and each river, then you're well on the way to being totally relaxed in the core. And when you get relaxed, your energies flow well, and then you'll balance your musculoskeletal system. Ken Wilbert has a lot to say about that. He's a normal intellectual, as you might call him, one of the better in the world today, talking about philosophy. He talks about 2 tracks. One is the Enlightenment track, which has 4 stages. That is from a very closed view onto a very open view in the fact that life is this joyous. Secondly, he has a second track, and that is about 8 different things, and that is how you really do, I have to get down there sometime, how you really do change your life and adjust your life around this new revelation. And that's really what we're all about here today, is adjusting our lifestyle so that you don't have to suffer the pain of arthritis. You have to see it though. There's no way I can impart that type of an awareness of the agony being nothingness. And most people come up and say, oh, but my cancer taught me such great things and how to be aware of all these wonderments of my life. Yeah, but I always ask, okay, you learned that. We can always look in retrospect and see that taught you something, and we can always look at that, a bad incident or bad experience can always be a good teacher. So that's kind of where we stand on that, but I don't like that. Anyway, I always say, well, yeah, you learned that, but you want to do it again? So actually, taking that argument to the extent, that does not make sense. It's like putting a child's hand on the stove and burning it to a crisp. Then he'd really learn his lesson. Well, this is absurd. So that is one way of learning, only one way. Yeah, so the summary of arthritis, huh? Pain comes and goes, everything changes. Pretty soon we'll be doing everything with electronics energetically. So there's a tipping point maybe in our analysis of arthritis and pain. My next topic, my next expose will be on pain. And that'll be fun, won't it? Pain can be fun. Yeah, just to get you started, a little bait there. It's now called the pain neuromatrix, and we have to include the brain for pain and interpretation of certain things for the brain in order to enable it to give you a pain message. In a sense, it's a sign that everything is working. That's another way of looking at it. Another way is to see that the pain matrix is highly malleable, and it depends a lot on what you're thinking, what you're believing, your mood, your depression state, especially for chronic pain. Acute, episodic pain, no problem. That just tells you to pull your foot out from under the wheelbarrow. That's all that's saying. And that's pretty easy. But then we can get more complex, but only gets so hard, and eventually you come to terms with maybe the spiritual nature of your life, emotions. Like I said before, and I really like this statement, pain is a direction, it's not an affliction. So we can kind of go into the different aspects of pain that sit there and wait for your discovery. All of life is a game, and we're just now kind of looking at the means and the ways and the fun of discovering new things. And in some ways we may be building those new things, constructing those newnesses, instead of just coming up with the discovery of it. We talked about that before in a very interesting, controversial video. To try and figure out, do we discover things or do we create things, or do we create how we discover things? Is it a 3 or 4 times removed thing? It's another story we can talk about later. But anyway, end of arthritis. Now you're all healed, aren't you? I think part of it is knowing that you can get out. Most medical doctors will tell you, you're stuck in a wheelchair, there's no way of fixing yourself. That's baloney. Because there are other ways around this thing. And how you do that is how you discover it. And if you're set on discovering these things, you're set on discovering the truth, you will. Who says you can't? Unless you somehow believe that all this struggle is not worthwhile, all this energy, all this output, all this intense intrigue, it's there for you. That's the fun part. I think fear can play a game with you, and so we can play the game back. That's the type of a thing we can actually enjoy, is playing the game back at life. Nothing is that serious. We're all going to end up in the same place, basically, and different shades of excellence and evanescence, huh? Another fun word. Yeah, this whole thing is all of these things, all knowledge, all awarenesses, all reverberations and resonances with the great insights and beauteous revelations. Just trying to get you to relax into your core and understand life with the deeper regions of your being, so that you can live the full and happy life. What is there? Is there another means, another way of living life other than happy? Yeah, non-optimized. Who said? And I guess I use this a lot. Who told you that you got to be punished, that you have to struggle and strain in life? I've got a book written by Stuart Wilde, a crazy guy. I like him. He's dead now. But anyway, he wrote a book. It's called Struggle is Not Your Natural Way, or whatever it is. A little pamphlet, and it's really fun. He actually was onto it, but then he died somewhat early. I think when you die is not necessarily an indicator of how much you have optimized your life in line with your enlightenments and your revelations. The whole life is aware and beauteous and intriguing and happy and joyous if you find it. I think cluttering it up. I've got another book. It's called The Essence of Reality, EOR. It's really a fun book, written by Nieder, I think his name is, and he actually kind of summarizes everything we need to know about life and joy and happiness. It's pretty phenomenal too, because it's the basic stuff I've kind of collected with all my reading. I started reading in probably 60, 65, the reward books that were really fun at that time. Had to go down to Schindler's to get them. They're pretty rare. But boy, I really enjoyed that. Now, about 3 years ago, I said, hey, about 60 years of reading or 50 years of reading, maybe I should start putting it to use, huh? Maybe I should start thinking positively and see if this stuff works. Well, it certainly does. It ain't gonna hurt. That's the main thing. Same with arthritis. You can start out in any kind of an activity and it ain't gonna hurt you. I think that is so core that that all this vernacular, all this stuff I came up with in this video, you can just say that it is what it is, and then start to branch out and see it with a larger and larger spectacle, as a larger and larger spectacle. And so that is the bottom line, is to see life as a big game, a big enjoyment. Who told you that it doesn't have to be enjoyable, that it doesn't have to be fulfilling, that it doesn't have to be loving? Who said that? Well, that would be Satan. Doesn't exist, so what the hell? Throw that out the window. Okay, we're on to something new now. Are there different sources of energy based on our awarenesses, our awareness levels, our insights, our revelations? Maybe we can call up all kinds of depths of energies, esoteric or otherwise, that put us into another level of fulfillment. Sometimes it has to be only accessed with peace and silence, because words are mainly a truncation of that kind of infinity. So yeah, a friend of mine, one of the MD friends, Bill, said that he'd like to see medicine go into the realm of the energetics, electronics, and we chatted about that for about 45 minutes. It really is the next stage, I think, in where this world is going to, and that is maybe we'll look at all this stuff, manipulation of the human body as somewhat barbaric, even to the point of manipulation of DNA. DNA is really phenomenal lately, what's going on in the DNA realm with CRISPR and being able to edit DNA. Maybe we're at the end because it might wipe us out, that kind of good news, bad news story of any kind of technology. But yeah, CRISPR, clustered, regularly interspaced, short palindromic repeats, strange things, huh? That's what it's all about. And you have to use the Cas9 enzyme, but that's another story. But yeah, think of this excitement that we're going to see as far as all these things going on. Maybe there is a truncation of nuclear armament. Maybe there is something that I can do, like Buckminster Fuller, when you turn the corner and you say, what can I add? What can I give all humanity? Maybe it's a fix for something that could go wrong. In other words, a safety. And we can maybe get into the high energy physics and play with some of those games. Fission, fusion, yeah, all kinds of good stuff. But now the sun is coming out. We're into the world of running out of battery. But yeah, it's a phenomenal day, and we'll get some excitement going here as far as our endpoint. Endpoint is always the beginning, and that's the fun part. Whenever something doesn't go right, I just say it's just another direction that I'm being shown. And that's a pretty nice way of looking at life. And if it's excruciating pain, that might be the way out. It might not. And it just depends on kind of what you find in the next minute or two. Any kind of pain, any kind of suffering, look one more minute, and you might see a whole new world. Welcome to Wyzetta. Add some fun things to what we've just already discussed. And that is, one, I went to a joint rehabilitation specialist And boy, he cranked me around. Man, he was bending me in places I didn't think could bend. I finally came out of there all right, all in one piece. And anyway, I brought this up to one of my orthopedic surgeon consultants. And he said, yeah, sometimes that works for about a day and a half. Then it comes back to normal. Lo and behold, he hit it right on the head. That's exactly what happened to me. So I gave up the old joint rehabilitation and started in on my own rehabilitation, which is basically walking and climbing hills. Anyway, that was one. Now, number two, there is another way of strengthening muscles, and strengthening is half of the battle. Part of it is coordination and balance, the other is strengthening the muscles. Because of sarcopenia, we do lose about 1% of our muscle mass per year over the age of 50. So you can figure that out if you want. But anyway, this was the two ways of strengthening muscle. One is to build up, like you curl a bicep and you kind of contract it, and that's one way of building your muscle. The other way is actually, and that's called concentric. The other way is eccentric. That is when you're actually stretching your muscle. That builds muscle also. That's something I didn't know. This is very important. It's phenomenal because now any type of movement is going to help you along. Just keep moving. Moving is the key, the bottom line. And this is a real interesting point, and that is that the nerves, the neurons do not correlate in firing rate with the amount of damage or the pain. So along with the fact that the radiographic evidence doesn't correlate with pain, neither does the rate of firing of those nerves in the critical area. So why does that happen? Why can we just not get that correlation and then maybe work from that? Well, pain can be very mysterious. That's what we're finding. In fact, now I'm going to just throw this right out at you. And that is, I'm going to jump way ahead in my pain paper to the very end and speculate, in a sense, that maybe proton jump conduction, yeah, you heard that right, proton jump conduction, it's hard for me to say, is a way that protons actually move through a fluid. And it's been known since the 20s and the 30s, 1920, 1930. And now we're finding that this is a way of communicating actually between one side of one liquid fluid substance and another. Could this be involved in pain? I've got to do more research on that, but it's really a good place that I can start and work ahead in the whole regime here. One of the biggest things that I did discover was I'm different and you're different. Everybody's different on how they react to pain and how they bring pain on. In fact, your pain is very, very unique to you. And the degrees and the methods of stimulation, how the brain coordinates that, moods, etc., all have something to do with pain perception. So that's what I discovered. Now, my mother had arthritis, went the full route. Well, I don't want to go that route, so I just kind of take notice that I am different than her, so I may not just follow in that footstep, in those footsteps. Secondly, I did something different, so I'm twice removed. Not just am I different than my mom, but I did something entirely different. She was sedentary, and I thought, well, I'm going to walk, and I'm going to do some exercises, and I did. So far, so good. This is a kind of a unique little scenario, actually a sequence that I underwent, and that was on June 21st of 2015. I was hurting pretty bad, as I described earlier. Well, I was writing this paper and sitting outside at Byerly's in Chanhassen, and came to a place where I kind of totally gave up. I said, you know, this trying to get healed is just getting too hard. It's ridiculous. It's not helping. I've been fighting this 2-3 years. Nothing's happening. So I'm just going to give up. This whole idea of trying to get healed, I think, is pathetic. So I jumped ahead of what my mind was telling me. In other words, different ways of getting healed, really diving in head first, trying to figure out different sequences of how to heal. Bought all those books, had 2 or 3 shelves of books on health and healing. Well, I got tired of it, just gave it up. Well, then on July 4th, which is about 2 weeks later, I went to the fireworks in Stillwater, and we had to park on the top of a hill. Obviously in Stillwater there are a few hills. Walked down, saw the fireworks, had a great time. Then walking the 100 steps back may be kind of a problem. Carrying a lawn chair and some food. Well, anyway, I did it. Whoa, made it to the top. The next day, I was mostly healed. An amazing thing. So there we are, 115 steps, starting here. We go all the way up to the top, and that is where Nirvana lives. You know Nirvana. Anyway, so now we have it, 115 steps. So anyways, I was saying Wayne Dyer went through this. He was leading some kind of a group up a big tower somewhere or a lighthouse, and one of the poor kids got stuck about halfway up, couldn't go up, and was kind of hurting, I guess. So Wayne put him on his shoulders and carried him up the rest of the way. And at that point, his pain in his, I think it was his hip also, I'm not sure, and went away. But he'd been diagnosed bone on bone also. It's in one of his videos. It's pretty phenomenal what we're seeing there. Anyway, we're trying to get to the root of this pain thing so we can actually fix it for good, and that is well within our possibilities and options. The way that we do that is much like this joke, or the billboard I saw, advertising for a plumber, and it said jiggling the handle is not a fix. And I like this. I think that's kind of what we're at. We've been putting all kinds of band-aids and opioids and everything onto pain, but what's the cause of it? I'm back into John Sarno, and I think a lot of it has to do with tension myositis syndrome. In other words, a lack of oxygen to certain muscles controlled by your psychological state. And that psychological state is up for grabs. A lot of things involved in that. Different rage, different disappointments, and sadness can actually make it occur when your brain is that set on these different attributes of your normal daily life. So people say, no, I'm not tense, and oh, hey, I'm not sad, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's the point. The point is you don't feel it, you don't sense it, so the body is going to amplify what is there in your subconscious and tell you to do some strange things to get to the roots of your problems, and that leads into the philosophy. And the philosophy is we got to look at the philosophy and come up with a whole different way of maybe looking at your life and God and whether you belong here and how much fun you can have. All those questions have to be there. It boils down to fun. Have fun. That's why we're here. Let's continue on. More and more topics, more and more fun. Yeah, talking about arthritis. So many small things add up. In fact, I was talking to somebody about this just recently, and it's starting to look very mushy, very involved with many different ways of looking at it. In fact, I've given you 3 to 5 to 10 to 20 in the video, and now we're even launching into other arenas. The mind is a big, powerful thing. The emotions are big and powerful as far as how they influence arthritis and all diseases and illnesses. So that is pretty phenomenal when you got to look at that, and you can't single out one or the other. You got to kind of put it all together and say, this looks like something other than what we added up to be. I was talking about arthritis to a couple of my friends too, and saying, you know, here we are. People go in saying bone on bone, it really hurts, excruciating, they can barely stand up. They get the joint replaced, and whoa, get the joint replaced and no pain. Wait a minute, bone on bone, that was the pain. Then you whack the bone in half, the whole femur, and yank that out and throw a titanium slab in there, post, a stake, drive that in, and glue another shiny acetabulum on your hip joint, on your sacrum, and my God, that doesn't hurt, and bone on bone hurt. What's the difference? Bones are funny. So let's get into this bone thing eventually. We'll start to play games with the bone thing as we get on to it. Yes, in fact, couple that up with the fact that these nociceptors, these pain receptors, change form. They can grow. They can metamorphose into different forms. In fact, we're not sure what each pain receptor looks like. There may be many more of them. They're usually small, unmyelinated. That's all we've got. So now we're starting to look at the differences in nociceptors and pain receptors being pretty phenomenal, really. So there is so much change going on there. And lately I've been bringing up my old concept that I used to use quite a bit. That is, are you prideful enough to think that you know exactly what's going to happen in the next minute to 5 minutes to 10 years? I mean, my God, nobody knows that. So we are all humbled in that respect, but humbled and exalted because it's a lot of fun to partake of those changes. Even notorious bank robbers of the past are are celebrated, my God, and the people are intrigued by it. So intrigue is my big word for the day. Oh, here is the great sun on the wind, wind on the sun, whatever. Why is it whenever the wind is from anywhere, it comes from this direction? That's kind of weird. It's kind of nice to have that. And here we are again at this wonderful location. Brings up dreams, enchantments, and imaginations that I really enjoy. See the wind across the plains, close to Flying Cloud, where I learned to fly. And now I still know how to fly, and then I'll be dead. Dad did that. Reached the apex of the aviation industry and then died. Okay. Kind of fun when you think about it. Anyway, we're going to summarize number 5 in my wonderful bones lecture, my arthritis lecture. First thing is, when I was at Mini Medical School, whoa, we got a little bit of a challenge with the air. Anyway, when I was at the Mini Medical School, an outreach program at the university that teaches all kinds of things about medical science, I was talking to a guy sitting next to me. His name was Tom, and he was telling me about his joints. Occasionally we get into that. And he just said that he went to the doc, and the doc treated him for the hip, but the doc said, well, let's look at the other one just for grins. Looked at the other one, and of course it was the same with no pain. I hear this over and over again, and that is, again, first thing I started out with is the radiographic evidence does not necessarily indicate the level and the position of pain. So we know that, and that just keeps playing out over and over again. I asked one of my orthopedic surgeon friends who I met. He had 17 years of experience, and I said, have you ever run into anybody who walks 3 miles a day who had advanced arthritis? He said no. Now draw your own conclusions. I'm just going to say I think walking is the key here. A lady I know in my building was sitting in the lobby, and she had real extreme knee pain. Had a real problem with that. She could barely get around that morning, and then all of a sudden it went away. I said, now wait a minute. This is not your standard arthritis. Let's start looking elsewhere. It probably was temporary, I know that, but yet still it points to the muscle and not bone on bone, etc. That is pretty rigorous. Slow movement does a lot more for your muscles than anything else. And there are 2 people that are really onto it. One is Miranda Esmond White, and she has a wonderful book called Aging Backwards, etc. She brings all this up and has a great discussion. And then another lady who I really like is Martha Peterson. And Martha has this great idea of pendiculation, which is actually slow moving of your joints, lying down, sitting, standing up, all these different positions, just so you move them, not passive manipulation like you tend to get in a chiropractic office. Anyway, I really like that. And I did talk to my favorite physical therapist, Doug. And he said that, I asked him about, hey, how about this psoas muscle? You know, what if that is really paining you, which goes into your leg, it does the outside of the hip. Inside of the hip, it can do that on rotation and go to lower back. That is your psoas. And he said, yeah, that is due to a weak set of quads, the front part of your top part of your leg. Because then your psoas has to take over. The way I remember it is these are the 2 muscles that are in front. You got the quads, top part of your leg. If that gets weak, your psoas takes over, and it's not built to carry that kind of a load. So anyway, you got to strengthen those quads and coordinate them also. Now, if you have pain in the back of your butt, back of your hip, that is caused by weak hamstrings, weak muscles in the top part of the back of your leg. Then the glutes have to take over. They get sore, they ache, they really are overstressed, and they contracture, and then they give you pain in your butt, pain in the ass. Okay, another way of looking at it. But anyway, so slow motion and a little building of those muscles. We talked about sarcopenia before. Sarcopenia, you lose 1% of your muscle mass per year after the age of 60 or 50. So you're down by 30 when you're 80. So 30% loss, that can affect the shifting and balance of your muscles. So the psoas muscle, that's the big muscle in the center of your body that connects the top half of your bod to the bottom half of your bod, and that's what the baby uses when he or she first sits up. It's the psoas muscle. It's a big muscle. Yeah, a friend of mine's friend had a bad hip, went to the doc. Doc said, just go do some walking, exercise it. And so he, at 70 years old, he walked 15 miles in one day. And his 85th birthday, he walked 10 miles in one day. That's what keeps him healthy. This whole bottom line is walking. It's walking. It's pretty phenomenal. How this paper is going to do me here. Anyway, one orthopedic guy in one of my meetings said, just do whatever makes it feel better. Whatever makes it feel better for you. You know, they're staying off it, getting on it. Usually getting on it is the name of the game, but just do whatever makes it feel better. If you have an outside of the hip pain, that is not your hip joint. That is probably a little bursitis. You have bursa in between those muscles that ride on your external trochanter there, and they can get very inflamed, very, very painful, and they can mimic arthritis, as you call it. But when you point to the outside of your hip, as I said before, that means it's not arthritis per se. Anyway, you can push into the pain when you walk. Start it out, you push it in a little bit, no problem. But if you try and push yourself in yoga, you can get some poses that will destroy yourself. Very painful. In fact, Wayne Dyer, I think, did that. He pushed the limits of yoga, and you know him, he was an all or nothing kind of a guy. And I think he pulled some muscles in there that inhibited him later on in life for him. Yeah, if we're going to talk about rheumatoid arthritis, that's an entirely different type of arthritis. It affects about 20% of the people. I saw one video, a lady who was totally crippled up with rheumatoid, swollen joints, looked like a mess. No pain. She kept exercising. That kept the pain away, strangely enough. So we got to work on that. I did read a book called How I Cured My Arthritis, and she did change her diet for rheumatoid. I would start with changing your diet for rheumatoid arthritis, seeing what you can come up with. She went to a grass and roots diet and got rid of her rheumatoid arthritis. Joint cartilage gets its only nutrition from motion. You got to remember this. Motion stimulates the synovial fluid and secretions thereof, and then it infuses into the matrix, the collagen matrix of your cartilage. That's the only way it gets its nutrition. So you got to keep it in motion. There have been experiments, phenomenal experiments, where they take a doggy, immobilize the joints, unload the joints for 3-4 months. Dog gets arthritis, very painful. So if you unload your joints too far, you're going to just exacerbate your arthritis. When instead of saying you're going out to walk the dog, say you're going out to feed your joints. That's kind of where I am with that. Now, when we're talking about healing, we got a little bit of a different perspective on healing. When you read something you really like a good poem or a good insight that you get, sometimes when you're just waking up, then that feeling is actually healing. That's kind of what your body is enjoying, the healing. Now, lately, a lot of I can't figure out a way to do this. Anyway, lately, a lot of the kids, 40-ish or so, are getting joint replacements. Can't say a lot, but an appreciable number is increasing. Why? Your joints aren't worn out. There's something painful. Yeah, they got that right. But that, again, points to the muscle. Everything points to the muscle and tendons. So one guy, one orthopedic surgeon, came clear. He just said, we just treat for the pain. And he didn't worry too much about whether there was a morphology there or pathology. A friend of mine who's an MD, Mayo doc, he said, if you have chronic pain or chronic anything, don't come to the medical establishment. We can't do anything with it. Go somewhere else. There are alternative methods. Even he admits that. Of course, he's pretty well into alternative medicine himself. Now, the ends of your bones are spongy bone, cancellous bone. Pretty porous, pretty soft, pretty light. It's built for a good high stress structure. In other words, you can put a lot of stress on it, but it's built so well that it maintains that structure. I was chewing on a chicken leg one day, and I said, "I'll just cut into that." So I whacked into it. Really soft. It's built to maintain your bounciness to your bones. That's part of the give in your muscles and joints. Now, there aren't many nerves in there. And I went to my own periodontist. I was talking to him, we were just shooting the breeze. And I said, there aren't many bones in cancellous, or aren't many nerves in cancellous bone. He said, yeah, and your skull is cancellous bone, cancellous plates, spongy bone. He said, yeah, I can drill a hole in your skull and you won't feel it. I said, well, yeah, okay. He said, no, I give you a little anesthetic, keep you happy. But no, basically not much going on there. The reason that we think it's highly innervated is the autonomic nervous system actually has a lot to do with that. Now, those nerves that infiltrate a fairly advanced arthritic joint are autonomic, surprisingly enough. That means they're actually balancing the osteoclasts with the osteoblasts so that the joint can rebuild itself. It increases the osteoblasts and decreases the osteoclasts that eat away at the joint so that you have a full turnover every 7 years in your joints. So this is one of those things you got to remember and look at what those nerves really look like. We've got a problem in taxonomy in some of these nerves. Some are encapsulated, some are bare nerves, some are nociceptors, and they have a weird morphology, and they change. The nerves can change, so that's one thing it's a moving target, very hard to keep track of. A friend of mine had knee problems, and I told him all about this whole thing that I'm telling you. And I said, you do walking, just walk, that'll help you a lot. And so we went to the Mall of America, started walking around. Anyway, started to walk around the mall, and his pain went down by about halfway around. And I said, well, hey, there you got your clue that you can get rid of this pain. Well, he went and had the surgery anyway. I don't understand that. I think it's the quick fix syndrome that really goes wild in people that need to get rid of it as fast as possible and not work on it. You're listening to this video. You have a chance at not doing the surgery, a real good chance of not having to have surgery for your pains. I was thinking about how this biotensegrity, which you heard in the other videos, really affects you. And it looks like, it's like at the Chinese finger puzzle, if you remember that, where you put your fingers in this sheath and you pull out, you can't pull them out because the sheath gets tighter. And then you push in and the sheath actually suspends your fingers away from each other when you push in only so far. So you've got this wonderful magic of that type of thing. And that's one of the many magical things that we've got going for us. One is Bernoulli's principle, which says that a high velocity air creates low pressure. That's when an airplane stays in the air. And so I'm saying, whoa, that's pretty interesting. We don't know how, but we certainly have quantified it, and I made my living on it. Another one is osmosis. We've done a lot of work on that. We don't know why high concentration gets diluted by the low concentration. Have a pretty good pressure built up for that motion, that transfer from dilute to the solute, the heavy solute. And then another one is biotensegrity. We really don't know how that does work, but it works, and it works great. So there are lots of things that enter into our amazing way. Another one that we have actually in ophthalmology, lens accommodation, where you're near vision. We don't know how that works. I can get into that in my eye video, but I'll just leave you with the fact that it's different than we discovered in the 1860s with Helmholtz. Much different. And now even the Europeans are capitalizing on the fact that we're stuck in the past. It's another story. The two deal breakers in life, things you can't live with. Now, one is pain, excruciating pain, can't live with that. Your vagus nerve will shut you down if it gets too painful. First, it collapses you. circulatory shock, then it'll put you to death if it's too intense. The second one is vertigo, dizziness. Can't do anything with that. So you got, it's kind of a downhill slide. You better get fixed. And in fact, life is on your side. You probably will get fixed. Yeah, one little ancillary side here. I talked to an orthopedic surgeon about hips. He said, yeah, the hips don't need much rehab after you change them out because they're pretty strong already, so you don't really have to work with that too much. That's good to know. My mother didn't do her rehab, and yet she had the wrong size ball and the wrong size joint, so that didn't give me any kind of an indicator there. Now, contracture is the name of the game. A muscle can contracture, excuse me, a muscle can contracture, and it can hold that contracture for years. That's why that pain stays. The muscle is just tight. And we can go into trigger points. I won't go there in this video. Now, my barber actually told me about her sister who had a joint replaced, and the doc said, the other one looks worse. What does that say about, of course, the x-rays? Back there again, huh? Just an aside, you use 300 of your muscles, of your 600 muscles, to stand. Some people go as high as 2,000 muscles in your body, but generally you're using 300 just to stand. So stand up. Standing at a desk, it does help. Not too much. You don't have to do too much of that. There is a case where they did try and throw some anesthesia into the joint spacing, and that didn't help the pain. So the pain isn't directly on those cartilaginous surfaces. I'm going to read this to you because I wrote it, and it kind of summarizes it, and I don't want to leave anything out and miss anything. Anesthesia, general anesthesia given for joint replacement, is why you can have no pain the day after the replacement. It actually relaxes the muscles. It actually relaxes, the anesthesia actually relaxes the muscles in an entirely new way. And along with the stretching, during the operation, it alleviates the contractures in those muscles. I talked to one doc about that. He said, well, it's a different type of a pain the day after. And I said, yeah, that's my point. It is a different type of a pain because it's a lot of different things involved in that pain. I'm actually kind of embarrassed that I didn't see this glaring thing that it is the muscle when you have a quick relieving of the pain the day after your joint replacement. Couple this with the placebo effect, and now you've got a pretty pervasive effect going on there. When you've got the relaxation with anesthesia, you've got a reworking of the muscles during the operation, and then you've got the placebo effect, which sometimes is up to 30 to 40%. You have probably a higher rate of healing even with all of those things involved. So you got a cycle. You're actually starting quite a cycle down. If you drop the pain through all those means, any means you can choose, then you are more relaxed, and then there's more of a pain drop when you can get those contractured muscles to relax, and then homeostasis sets in so that you get a balanced out in a non-pain situation. So all of this kind of enters in. We'll do more later, and that's the end of number 5 of my arthritis paper. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hope my notes haven't destroyed my audio. Anyway, have a great day. Bye-bye. Well, thank you for watching. That was a wonderful arthritis video dwelling on the intricacies and mysteries of this great anomaly called pain and arthritis, osteo basically. It's been a wonderful time to share with you. Even though it's been a little long, you'll get the information you need, and there will be a percentage of you that can avoid surgery. And basically its basic criteria is that you want to avoid surgery. Most people just go for the quick fix, so to speak, even though it's only about a 70 to 80% success rate. This stuff is easier. You just kind of immerse yourself in all this information I gave you and use 1 or 2 points or 10 or 20, and you'll come out looking forward to this new day where you can actually kind of abrogate the fears and the pain. Pain we'll get into later, another video, but hope you've enjoyed this. And now I've transferred some of that healing energy to you in the magic of video, images, and sound. So have a great day and have a wonderful rest of your life. I mean that with all sincerity, that we are in this together to enjoy the happiness of this gift called existence on this plane. Bye-bye.